welcome to Cabaret, Reclaiming the Theatrical Canon chat. And this is going to be amazing and fun. And with us this evening, we have Temple Fortson, Stefan Siddick, and me. And I don't know why I did my hands like that, as if that was going to make a difference, but yeah, I did. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you two, and I'm just going to pop in. I'm going to stop share for a second, and who knows, I might share again.
Well, I will start because I picked this topic, and I picked it for a very specific reason. This is a very sensitive show because it is viewed as, it's a show about Nazi Germany, the effects of Nazi Germany on German Jews, on German people, on homosexuals, on various peoples in the music industry and the entertainment industry in Germany. What I found interesting about the show is that it doesn't always talk about what it's about, which is the Nazis and the problems. Like, it all of a sudden just comes out of nowhere towards, in little bits of it, talk in the middle and then the end. So the argument I've heard against showcasing people of color or other people, people other than Caucasian people in this show, is that it is a Jewish story. It is a story of the persecutions of Nazis. However, again, one should learn from history because if you know a little bit about Nazi Germany, one, people of color were there. People of color were persecuted. They were sterilized. They were murdered. Actually, specifically Black artists who were fleeing, African-American artists who were fleeing America so they could actually have their music heard during the 30s and the 40s and as early as the 20s, were going to Europe and going to Germany where their music could be heard and was appreciated. And then when the Nazis came, part of shutting down all of the culture and the purification of the race was shutting down these African-American artists and basically making it illegal to listen to any artists who were not German, first of all, and German white. An artist named Hilarius Gilges, who was a dancer and was also a singer, was actually murdered by the SS in 1933, and years later his wife was actually given restitution. So it's something that is known in German culture, but it is not something that seems to be known in America. For, I'm sure we can guess, multitudes of reasons. So the argument I would have for saying absolutely you could cast Cabaret with multiple people, cross-dressing people, people who of various racial backgrounds, is because we were there, they existed, they also were persecuted and had their own symbols with the triangles and the stars and the various things. And so I don't actually understand the argument against it. Like, I understand one argument I did hear, which was that there is a fear that if you open up the conversation to include other people the Nazis persecuted, it devalues the Jewish experience. I would say to that, I don't necessarily agree because although the Jewish experience was in numbers far greater, and I would never take that away, I don't think saying you hurt multiple people makes hurting any of those people less important. So that would be my initial argument for why absolutely you should, I think not only that you can, you should cast Cabaret as multiracial, multi-sexuality. If anyone was the second in persecution to Jewish people, it was homosexuals and cross-dressers. So they have absolutely a place in this show. So that's my starting speech. Feel free to comment.
Thank you, Temple. That's a great way to start. I'm really thanks for bringing up. What's the name of that artist that was murdered?
Gilgis, hilarious Gilgis. They called him Larry, L-A-R-I. The last name is Gilges. There were actually several who were imprisoned as well. I found an amazing source online.
Because I think that's really interesting, because I think that what you said is so spot on, and particularly about how American or the United States filters the experience in a different way than Germans themselves or people from other countries who, like the US, might have been involved in the war on one side or the other, but were not in Germany. I think we tend to filter it. Well, a really good example for us that brings it home, because Americans are like, oh, America is the Olympics, and Jesse Owens, 1936, winning 4 gold medals. And Adolf Hitler had no choice but to stand there while Jesse Owens received the gold medal. Proving that a Black man could beat in sports, in fair sports, through his athleticism, when Hitler was talking so much about the athleticism of Germans and the athleticism of the Aryan Jewish, non-Jewish, right, Aryan race, the white race, and going back to that, what he thought was, back to the culture, to Wagner and all this, but then here's Jesse Owens, and there was like nothing Hitler could do, right? It was like, to me, that sort of thing is the perfect example of someone just living in activism rather than like being an activist. He was just living and doing his thing. And can you imagine the pressure of that poor man trying to compete in the Olympics? Talk about like Simone Biles, and everyone's talking about that pressure, which is crazy pressure.
Yeah.
That multiplied by 1,000 million, whatever, how many more you want, that he's trying to knowing full well that he could be killed, even if he's out on the street, or, in America too, by the way.
Right.
But I'm just saying, in the seat of Nazi Germany, in the height of 1936. So I think I agree with you. There's no reason why the show can't be cast in any way, really. And also because of the way the show is sort of structured, the world of the Kit Kat Club, right? And I've been in the show, so the world of the Kit Kat Club is a fantasy world. Those people live totally outside of what's the whole point of the show is that they don't see what's happening outside in the real world, and it's coming. It's right before the beginning of Nazi Germany, the takeover of the Nazis. And so I found a quote while I was just doing some, pre-reading. I found a quote that says, "Cabaret presents a potent message on the dangers of mass indifference in the face of injustice, atrocity, and state terror." So I think the whole point of at least of the show is that this is happening. It's about to happen, and people are either don't care, aren't aware, think it's not going to be as bad, or turn a blind eye, or in the case of Fräulein Schneider, has to make a horrible choice in order to survive. What would you do is the song, right? So it's such a great show. And apparently Harold Prince, who was the producer and the director of the original production in the 60s in the US, apparently he was inspired, he said, by the civil rights movement that was happening in the United States, seeing images of people being attacked by dogs or hoses sprayed on them, being attacked for just marching peacefully with Martin Luther King. Those images from Birmingham, images from, wherever he was seeing on the TV, that's what he used as his basis. So he wanted to make it actually more real to Americans. So I thought that was interesting.
It's funny you say that, and you've just inspired me, because I will admit this has never been my favorite show. I've enjoyed it, but it's never been one of my favorite shows. But I have to tell you, I would love to see a modernized version almost, because it is incredibly relevant today based solely on what you just said. And it would be interesting to have it take place in America, even if we did do it during the civil rights movement, take the same show. And we could even, I know people would never be allowed to because of rights and they would lose their minds, but being able to adapt it to a speakeasy or some kind of 60s club would be really interesting, juxtaposing in America same exact things going on, same exact oppression that people are ignoring right outside their door. Not saying that's true now in 2020, but I'm just saying it would be a really good show to revamp and redo in a new setting.
Yeah.
You've inspired
Well,
me.
there's a theater group that did do that. San Diego Theater. That was the, wait a minute, let me share
Go
this.
for
Folks.
it.
Pull Frida up in the photo. I see Frida trying to be a part of this. So this one, which was done at San Diego Theater, so they had an African American, Sally Bowles, and they split the MC role between a seasoned actress, which is this young lady, and a 14-year-old youth. But the reasoning behind it was that the 14-year-old youth was trying to learn the groundwork. Like, I'm trying to learn everything that is kind of happening. But even though it was cabaret, they said it very now, but still somewhat like a throwback to the original, but very present. They received a lot of flack for it, of course, because there's this 14-year-old child that is being a sexual MC, but they said this is everything that was occurring within cabaret was a grooming ground for people that were trying to survive. And they actually had several conversations about this particular Sally Bowles and how she would play it, because people were like, well, she's African American, she can't play that role. And they were like, well, she can. They're not having her play it as the white Sally Bowles that we are accustomed to. They were having her play it as someone that knew, one, she had to abort the child because she couldn't have a mixed child in Germany. Two, she wasn't a sympathizer, but she had to play the roles in order to save her own life. So kind of like what you were saying, Stephan, is that the Kit Kat Club was this alternate world where people could go and save themselves and be themselves. And she just happened to fall in love with Cliff. But their take on it was rather cool back in 2017. And they had their own little acclaim just based on the way that they took it. But I just thought that was quite unique, just how they played that whole concept of, we're really going to mix it up. And they knew that mixing it up, and also it was immersive. So for that one, the entire show happened all around the audience. So the audience was, you've always had the Kit Kat Club tables, but the entire room was Kit Kat Club. So they were in it. There were dances going all the way back to the dressing room. So there were screens up. So I was just like, wow, I probably should have been in San Diego in 2017 to see something that immersive, to where when they're going in the back and they're doing whatever, that pops up on the screen and you could see it if you wanted to or not. But that was just one of those where they're like, we're going to do it US style with the original Berlin flair.
I love that. I really wish I could go back in time and see that.
I know.
I wish they would archive more of these shows. Now with Zoom and with people doing things online, I hope there's more of accessibility and availability, because this would be such a great thing to be able to see. And now, theater is so ephemeral. You do it and then it closes, and then if you missed it, you missed it. It's like, really? Ugh. So I wish they would archive things, at least for educational purposes, because I'd love to see that. I mean, my experience with Cabaret is weird, because I was exposed to the film before the show as a very young child. Mm-hmm. My parents let me watch the 1972 film, Bob Fosse film version with Liza and Joel and Michael York, which of course is very different from the original Cabaret show. Yep. And then when I went to college 20 years later, I went and did Cabaret. And when I went to college in 1992 at UVA, University of Virginia, Charlottesville, they still hadn't done the revivals. They had done one 1987 revival, which I think is, but they hadn't done the newer revivals. So the show was still the old show when you did it in college or you licensed the rights. So we did the old show that didn't have maybe this time in it, or didn't have, but didn't have the money. It had the money song in it.
Yeah.
So it's really original. And then the claim to fame of that production, and I think Ricky knows this about me already, and maybe Temple does too, is that Tina Fey played Sally Bowles in that production.
Girl.
Yes. I did not know that.
I thought maybe because of UVA.
Sure.
Yeah. So Tina Fey was at the UVA drama department, and in 1992 was her last year, her 4th year. And it was kind of controversial when she got cast. She was sort of the darling of the department in that all the teachers loved her because she was in everything and did everything. And exactly as you see her, that's how she was. And I was a sophomore, and I was just one of the Kit Kat boys or dancers or whatever you call them, or waiters as they are in the original production. They're just waiters. And there was kind of a controversy at the time in 1992 when we cast the show, or the director, because there were two other girls up for the part, women up for the part, and one of them was African American, and she had by far the strongest voice of and I would say there was another woman who was Caucasian who auditioned who also had a stronger voice than Tina, but Tina was Tina. And so Tina got the part, and she's one thing people won't ever know about Tina Fey. She's an amazing dramatic actress. It's just that you'll never see it.
Really?
Right? Yes, brilliant, better than comedy. Her comedy is
because her book is amazing.
Yeah, I know. Yes. So Tina definitely dominated it. I was there at the callbacks. Tina definitely dominated in the acting category, but the other two dominated in the vocal category. But I think the director was going more with the original production of Cabaret, where Jill Hayworth played it, who was not
the original.
She was the original. She really wasn't a singer, really.
Yeah.
She could kind of sing, but she wasn't a big belter. So this idea of the big belter came after the movie. So it was weird to do the show when the movie was so different, and I was expecting the movie, and then the show had all these different songs and things that I had never heard of, and I was like, what the heck, So so that actress who didn't get cast as Sally Bowles, who was Black, ended up being a Kit Kat girl. And then we had another girl who ended up being a Kit Kat girl who was Black. And so we had one of our waiters was African American, was Black guy. So there were 3 ensemble members who were not white. And so I guess the director was open to that. It's just that he wasn't ready maybe yet to see, or maybe she just wasn't, ready. The actress wasn't ready. She was my class, so she's a little younger. I don't know. But anyway, the point is, we talked about race in Cabaret back in 1992 when we did it. So I think everyone who does the show talks about race either during, before, casting. So at least the conversation is happening. And then you have the audience members who come to you after the show going, why were there Black people in the show? There shouldn't be any Black people in the show. It's about Nazi Germany. And then you have to do what Temple just did, the whole intro, and explain to them some history.
Hey, Mark.
Just jump in. We're talking about people of color and Cabaret.
Yes. I am so sorry. I had trouble logging on tonight. What's up? Catch me up if you don't mind. What's
I don't even know how to start that. Go ahead.
Let's see. How do we catch up? So we started talking about Temple. What?
We started off, because Ricky is already gone. We started off talking about the history of Nazi Germany and the history of people of color, homosexuals, the various people who were considered mentally disabled, all the various people living in Nazi Germany who were persecuted by the Nazis, and especially jazz singers, jazz music, African-American artists who had fled America to Europe in order to get their music heard. And then this happens. So they were killed, persecuted, etc. And how the existence of these people in real life justifies the existence of them in casting, because they were really there, and they were artists, and they were people that would be attending this Kit Kat Club. And then following that, Stefan was talking about, the experience first with Jesse. Oh my gosh,
Jesse Owens.
Jesse Owens, and showing the eugenics of Nazi Germany as being completely false, obviously, by this Black man who has dominated in a purely fair performance at the Olympics, and then talking about how we could recast it and then also look at the true story, which is about this fairy tale land that is ignoring what's really going on outside, and how that really is extremely relevant to America today and America yesterday and America the day before that, and how we could reimagine the show if we wanted to, and put it into American terms, change the location and still be a relevant and amazing show. That then left to Stefan telling a story about how it was cross-cast, at least in the ensemble, when he was in college in '92. So this conversation has been going on for many, many years. And that brings us up to, hey, Mark, welcome, join the conversation.
And this is what we call comprehension, ladies and gentlemen. That's conversation comprehension. We were listening and we were able to answer his questions. There we go.
Cool.
So, any questions?
No, you caught me up. Let's jump in and keep going from here. That was great. Thank you, Temple.
Well, I mean, I think it would be interesting if the character of Cliff were played by an African-American actor or a Black actor or an actor of color that wasn't white. Because in the show, the way I see the show, if you really strip away everything else, the show is about an outsider who comes into this environment that he's not really that familiar with. And suddenly he's thrown into sort of the deep end right at this really critical period of this country's, craziness of what's about to happen. And he sees it. He sees it before Sally Bowles sees it. He sees it before some of the people around him see it, maybe because he's an outsider. And I guess it's the whole Christopher Isherwood, who was gay, right? Or is gay. Is he still alive? There's one that was still, I think there's a movie about him and his,
keep going.
There's one about him and his partner. So it's I always get confused because the show is based on Christopher Isherwood's I Am a Camera, but also John Van Druten's Berlin Stories. Is that
yeah.
This is all out of my head. I did not research it. I just remember it from being a kid. I was so obsessed with this movie, which is totally different than the show. We went over that too, Mark, how the movie and the show.
Right. Oh God, yes.
How Bob Fosse took the show, which has problems, and made this movie that it, Oscar-winning, directing, because and her and Liza and Joel winning Oscars. It's such an amazing feat to turn this show into a movie. But anyway, that's a whole other. We can talk about that later. But
Christopher passed away in 1986.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so
wow.
sooner than
I thought it was more recent
than I thought. Yeah, I thought it was sooner or more close to. But the point is, it's one of those things where he, as a gay man, probably felt often very alienated in wherever he was up until Stonewall, and even past Stonewall, as we all know, for a long time. So I think there's a bit of that alienation. So I think the key is the alienation, and also obviously Harold Prince borrowed tons from Brecht because he wanted it to be very Brechtian, and he had Lottie Lenya in the original cast, so he was Kurt Viles, but so he was probably like, let's use this and let's make it all. So it's very Brechtian. The movie is it's a different kind of Brechtian, but so it's interesting. I find that there's a lot of things to explore, and not just the issue of race, but the issue of otherness.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's with the fact that there's so many different variations on it, that each revival has done something different, added pulled out more of bisexuality, pulled out more of the ugly. I mean, even the beginning side of the show, they didn't sugarcoat it, but it's more, there's a lot more than what's implied than in some of these other versions. Plus, like I said, the movie, which I consider is basically a whole nother story that just borrowed some music from it. It's like it flipped everything on its ear, took it into an entirely different world. And because of that, I mean, even if you're being the most truest you could be, to put an African or American or another any other minority in any of the roles really changes and gives you different variety of different dynamics that you can play with. I would say the most as long as you leave the Nazi people as as white and Nazi, you could even play with that if you wanted to at some point, just to get a different inverse take on it. But Sally's British, Sally's American, Sally's this. Sally, where is Sally? They all is it just they all are open to exploring another side of whatever their, like you said, their otherness, their whatever's their outsideness that makes it part of this world. It's and it can give you a variety of unique dynamics with a black Cliff or a black Sally or a black MC even. I mean that could open all kinds of doors and windows of a black gay man in this, who's popular and leading his little quarter of the world. But while this bigger thing is unfolding around all of them, that they're dancing and seeing, not seeing, again, depending on the version of your interpretation, what that's all about.
So here's my strange question, because I've choreographed it. I can't remember if I've ever been in it. I'm not sure. I've choreographed it so many times, it seems like I've been in it. The MC, and I'm just going to throw this out there. Every time that I have done it, every director that I know of has always, and Joel Gray and Alan Cummings are both just amazing performers. Everyone seems to try to create that moniker when they're casting the MC. And I agree with Mark to cast it other than. I have seen, based on Google searches, I have seen female MCs. I showed a picture of a female and a 14-year-old MC, two people. They split the role. Mm-hmm. That was in 2017. We were just talking about how we wish we could go back and see that one. It was in San Diego.
You had a picture of a black MC, the first black MC as well.
Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Who is he? I know who he is. The minute I go to the picture, hold on, let me share it. I know this person because every time I see it, I don't know why I think Aladdin, but that's not him. Who is he?
Who is that?
I know. I never remember his name either, but I have seen his face.
Yeah. But anyway, he was the first in 2013, the first African-American.
It took that long. Wow.
It took that long.
Now, mind you, it might have happened in community theater. Might have happened, but professionally, this was the first one in 2013.
To me, it's like the one role that's not even like there's no question. It could be any. He's such a magical, weird character. He could be any race, any person, any otherness, whatever.
Like I just had a vision. How in the world did the world go on without Ben Vereen as the MC? I mean, how
the character, the leading player character, is based on the MC in Cabaret.
It's a crime that never happened.
I guess because Joel Gray just nailed it and literally played it for 2 decades in every revival that came along. It was just
87.
And the movie, he just like
he owned that role. It was hard. It's hard.
I saw a production wants to play
it.
2 years ago. It's coming back to me. And they really went off the wall with the casting. It was a black Sally. It was a Middle Eastern, tall, good-looking Middle Eastern guy as the MC. And again, that a whole different dynamic in the way that he controls the club, controls the music, controls the story as the MC does. But it was an interesting, very, very multicultural down to the ensemble. They did a really interesting job, and I'd never seen all of that done at once. And they did a good job with it, and it did just make the dynamics a little different. But it definitely, he was because I usually see it played sort of like like a little imp, a demon, something slightly, slightly enticing, something. And this guy played it with a little more of a, he was good looking with more of a sexual allure. And it's like, that works. I've never seen that, but it was, they did a great job with it.
Now, I do have a question. I think everyone here has directed, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Not
So-
Cabaret. Not the musical
I have not
Cabaret.
directed Cabaret.
No, that's a hard one.
When you do make a decision as a director to step outside of, especially community theater, one of the things I find community theater doesn't do is step too far outside of whatever the most popular version of a show was. They get very stuck in that. And when you do decide to step outside of it and take a moment such as casting strangely, or not strangely, differently than Broadway did in the 70s, do you ever add that to your director's notes or use your director's notes as a chance to educate the audience on your choices? And I say that because I do think that might be a good tool we should consider in the future.
I do. Well, you know, because I'm always casting something strangely.
I don't ever, I did Anything Goes a while back at LTA, and I had this wonderful actor who just wasn't the right vocal range, but I would have cast him as Billy in a heartbeat. He's good looking, tall, amazing voice, but he was just the wrong vocal range. And the music director was like, "We can't do this," and I was like, "Ah." And so I ended up casting him as the next thing that I could cast, where I cast him as the captain of the boat. And that caused more controversy than if I had cast him as Billy, because they were like, well, it's 1932 and the captain of a big, ship like that wouldn't be black. And I said, I cast him because he was like the tallest guy, he's good looking, and he was charming and very sweet. And they had some scenes where he accompanied the older woman like to her seat. And I just thought, and then he was also he got to do other things too in the ensemble, and he got to dance and sing. But I was just like, I wanted him in the show, and I wanted him in a part that wasn't just, crew member number 3. He could have been one of the sailors. I had men of color who were sailors too, but he just was going to stand out so much that he had to be in a prominent, like if I was doing Shakespeare, he would have been a king. Like he had to be in a role of power. It was just his body, his type. And so I think as directors, if we're going to put anything in notes, I mean, we can't really put that kind of stuff, right? We can't say like, I cast this actor because, but I think it does go through our head, right? A lot of times we sit there and we go, I want this person in my show. I don't care what color they are. I don't care if they're, green. I want them in my show because they're so good on stage, and I'm going to find a place for them, even if if someone else doesn't think so. I don't know. I just feel like Cabaret you can do that. I think Cabaret is a show where you can do that.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people get scared of, and I hear it a lot anytime that I have tried to, when I have cast outside of the normal type. They're just like, where our subscribers won't like it. And I said, well, I'm not directing for your subscribers. I'm directing my show. They can come see it or they can stay home.
Wow. I've never encountered that.
It happens a lot, especially down here.
I mean, I've heard about picking a certain show for your subscribers, or
why do they,
even God forbid, I mean, you saw a lot of it across the board when the Black Lives Matter said, well, what will our subscribers think? I'm like,
who are these people?
That's ridiculous.
I in my podcast that I have, the American Theater Artists Online, I interviewed Michael Bobbitt, and we were talking. He was like, I came to this new theater in Boston back then. He was at the New Conservatory, and he was like, the board was saying, but our subscribers. And then in the conversation, I said to Michael, who are these like magical people that are the subscribers? Everyone thinks differently. There is no the subscribers. Maybe it's an old lady who's going to call and complain, an old racist diabetic candy eating lady. Great, good for her. But that's not our subscribers. A. B. Nobody subscribes anymore. The theater model is totally different. Tell the community theaters that no one's subscribing. People are buying individual tickets, and 90% of the people who are still subscribing are really old. They're not going to be around for long. So your theater isn't going to be very sustainable if you are playing to a crowd that will not be here in 10, 15 years. So play to the younger people, because you want to get young butts in the seats, because those are the ones that are going to
Those are the ones that will end up being your subscribers
later.
Right. It was like you have to build in other words, grow your trees so that you have leaves and branches that can cover. And a lot of people just, eventually that big giant red oak is going to fall. You have to build your next tree. And that's going to start from small individual things, the newer people. And it's really weird because I think now I could say probably 25 years ago, I might have had a different mindset because I was young and wasn't necessarily thinking, but now I'm looking for a theater. I want you to speak to me, but not necessarily me in my age. I need you to speak to things that matter to me, but also those things that speak to those that come after me.
Well, the other thing is we're now at a really good crossroads where we can educate and train the next generation of theater goers. So we're at a place where we can teach them things like, no, Oklahoma does not have to be all white. We can show people in wheelchairs. La la la, Broadway just did it. You know what I mean? Like, we are now responsible to not just carry on theater. We're responsible to make sure it lives on after us. And we're all, and that the people who are living on their phones and can't see anything else but their phones will still want to go to the theater. And it shows that they're doing like Six, Hamilton. It's these shows that are taking history. We just made history class cool again on Broadway. It can be done to educate the next generation. And I think we need to start channeling community theater the same way.
And to answer your question, Temple, I kind of draw a line for myself between more contemporary theater, and classic theater, as far as what I do with a piece. And I find my balance is, if it's something contemporary, something new, something hot, don't reinvent it, because that's not what the people are there. The people are rushing to see that title or what they see. But any of your old chestnuts, I would rather find a way to. Oklahoma opened so many different channels in my brain just to watch it, because I have never liked. I've actively hated Oklahoma. I have never made it through a production without. I never saw the movie all the way through because I couldn't even sit through it. I finally got a comp ticket to see the dinner theater. I'm like, this is all this show's about. Who she's going, 3 hours of who she's going to the dance with. Oh my God. And I had nothing good to say about Oklahoma. And I won the lottery. I'm like, I'm gonna go check this out because I won a lottery, got in my car, drove to New York, and I'm 3 numbers in going, I'm not hating this. I'm not hating anything about this. And by the end, I'm like, oh my God, you have just found a way to tell me a story that I hate actively and made me love it and believe it. So that was a game changer for me. And as I said, and again, why should I present an Oklahoma or a Brigadoon or something through a 1940s lens? There are themes in there. I found so many of the masters are so far ahead of our time. Everybody's like, oh, this is not what they meant. This is not what they would. It's like,
it's what they
change
meant.
a word. And maybe back in the 40s, this was not palatable. Let's just kind of whitewash a cover. But they did not change a word or a lyric. It was all there. And I find that and the big one that goes down forever is not South Pacific. Well, that too, but Carousel. Oh my God, spousal abuse. We can't. It's like, do you understand? Just because there is abuse, that's not endorsing it. They're not. It was a different time. No, you as
a show about redemption. Carousel is about redemption.
It's a conversation to learn. These are lessons to learn from it. We're not giving you a story gospel. So basically, long and short of it is, yes. When I tell an older story, I will definitely make bigger strides and change it, try to view it through a new lens and find these new themes. But I don't necessarily beat the audience over the head with that in the notes, because I don't want to scare them away. I saw the walls and went up with, oh my God, Oklahoma. But it was fantastic. I want them to watch it, see it, think through, and get it on their own. I mean, because if I make it a point, it's pretty obvious what I'm doing. But yeah, there's so many. I mean, that is how classic theater to me is going to live on. Because otherwise there is no point in telling these stories the way they were. But I've seen so many of these new revivals, and Bartlett Sher in particular is a master of pulling characters, pulling stories. I saw The King and I, the most beautiful show I've ever seen, and Lady Tion wins an Oscar, a Tony, for a show that's like 20 lines and a big song. But if you watch that, the stuff that she did off the page,
Yes.
amazing, and it brought a completely different character. Every one of those children in that parade of the family had a different relationship with her. It was like she was amazing. So there are ways to pull different, and you've got to do that. But that's it. But I said no. Did you answer your question? No, I almost never address, because if I start pointing out that I'm doing something with race, I don't want it's woke, it's this.
It'll start setting him up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good.
What were you getting ready to say, Stefan?
I was just going to say Oklahoma's a great thing to bring up, Mark, because even though we're talking about Cabaret, Oklahoma is another show that, depending on what's happening in the world at the time when you're seeing that show and directing that show, you should be attuned to that. Right. So the original production in the 40s was all about everyone's at war. We're coming back from World War II. We're in the middle of World War II. And people were nostalgic for the West, for heading west and going to play, the land we belong to is grand, that stuff. But then I saw the production. I didn't see the Broadway production, but the production I saw that changed my mind on Oklahoma, and maybe Ricky and Temple saw it or you did, was at Arena Stage. Before the Broadway production with Alicia Gamble, my friend Alicia Gamble playing Laurie. And
I was trying to remember. I was like, what was her name? Alicia.
I forget the gentleman's name who's Latinx playing Curly. Let me tell you, when they, Rodriguez, I don't want to.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of
they're good friends. So, but they became good friends with that production. For the first time in my life, I heard Oklahoma the way it was meant to be heard, which was they both stood there at one point looking out into the audience and saying, "This is our land, the future. This is all ours." And I thought to myself, "Oh my God." Right. Whereas you don't really pay attention to it when it's just a bunch of white people, because you're like, well, yeah, of course the land's yours. Duh. Right? Big deal. But they were moving west, that you're expanding out into the, of course you're killing Native Americans in the process. But, the point is having people that were not white claim that space and talk about there's a new something coming, the energy of America. It gave it a whole other feel, right? It suddenly wasn't about that. It was about something. So I think, and then on Broadway, they did it with, in other ways, which I didn't see. But, so I think it's great how each director and time period that you directed. And, when I did Anything Goes, it was right after the election of Donald Trump. It was 2016 into 2017. And there's a line in there, they think he's gangster number one, so they've made him the favorite son. And that goes to show that line had resonance. I'm the nominee of the GOP or GOP, but if baby, I'm the bottom, you're the top.
You're the top.
Right? Cole Porter's lines in there worked in 2017. So, like you said, Mark, the masters are the masters. Take them and do things with them and update them. They would probably want you to.
Yeah, messaging can be repurposed all over. And, even with Cabaret, I've seen it. I remember taking, my husband Greg to see the show at Signature. And he had seen it before. And he goes, okay, really, do I have to see this again? Really? It's not making much sense to me. And yes, now Arenas wasn't necessarily multicultural, but what they did do was they definitely highlighted the concept of what was going on. He still talks about that show. And I think that was probably 2016. I don't know. It was a while ago when they did it, but he just goes, wow. Because they ended it with the person playing, and I'm going to say this all wrong, and it's going to come out wrong, and I'm admitting it. The person playing the monkey, the gorilla.
Yes.
Was at the end, they had people come out and literally attack and rape and strip the costume off and leave pretty much a half naked girl in the middle of the floor. That's how it ended. And he just goes, I think I now understand Cabaret.
Well,
and I'm looking at him going, oh, okay. He said, and I wish he were here so he could explain. He had this really elaborate, just based off of that. Lost until he got to the very end. He goes, I now get it. It's a representation of this, and this. And he said it doesn't matter what color that the person was. That was just pretty much how that whole, I think I'm starting to remember what he said, the whole system had just raped culture at its core.
Yep.
And I
Well,
was like,
this is, and I said to Ricky before we started this call, the production of Cabaret I liked the best was directed by Rick Hayes, because at the end of his show, and he had a fairly multicultural, group of a lot of people from various backgrounds. At the end of the show, he had all of the actors standing with the symbol that the Nazis gave whoever they would have been symbolized as. So you had the triangles, you had the stars, you had the, the black symbols, you had the symbols for the people who were considered less than mentally aware. It's everything. So you had a whole cast
quality symbol, yeah.
Considered their symbols. So everybody was represented. It was just silence and their symbols. And then the lights went down and he left one spotlight on a group of shoes. It was the most powerful ending I have ever seen of Cabaret. And in that moment I went, I'm going to rewatch this show. Like, I was like, okay, I see where you go. Because the funny thing about Cabaret is, it is a very, very complex, deep, intelligent show that most people only associate with cute, fun songs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Two Ladies, adorable song. Love that song. Money Song. All of these things are very upbeat, fun, blah, blah, blah. And if you only pay attention to the soundtrack, you miss so much of what Cabaret is about.
But in the Brechtian style, the songs comment on what's happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
they
so,
do, but it's amazing how
Fosse
much
took
people
it
don't
to
pay
the next
attention.
level. Yeah, Fosse took it to the next level in the movie, the same. Because Fosse made, in the movie version of Cabaret, every song was in the Kit Kat Club. There was no singing.
Right.
Other than the one song, right? In the beer garden. That's the only song that is not sung in the Cabaret. It's the reality of what's happening. Tomorrow Belongs to Me, the Nazi anthem by the young.
In the stage play, other than Cliff's song, which they cut, is there anything else that? Oh yes, of course, the old lady sings. I was like, other than
the pineapple
party.
song.
The pineapple song,
the telephone song.
I do that when the sun was set. That old.
There's tons of
what
stuff.
Would you do?
Yeah.
Yes, and I forgot.
Yeah,
I've seen it 100 times, but it's like but the Kit Kat stuff is the stuff that stays.
It's what's
with you.
Exactly.
The whole Lottie Lenya, the whole Fräulein Schneider and her Schultz subplot is excised in the film, which was a huge risky move by Fosse, right? But I think he thought that by telling the story of sort of the atmosphere of what was happening, the story becomes kind of redundant. I mean, I like the Schultz Fräulein Schneider storyline. I mean, it's the one that tugs at your heartsestrings, right?
I kind of found in the original production that I saw for years and years and years that for some reason, whether it was just directed for, but they seemed, even though they are the story, they seem to slow the show down. And whatever they did in this revival, every time I've seen it ever since, it's like whatever they did, they come out in a much better light. And you are sympathetic from the word go, and it's like you almost can't wait to get back to them, because they whatever they did to tighten it up they did a good job with, because now they are the emotional point of the story, and Sally and Cliff are almost the supporting story.
As much as Herr Schultz is the heart, you feel for him, obviously. Fräulein Schneider is sort of the brain. It's sort of she's the really interesting character, right? Because it's happening to her, it's affecting her life, and yet she still can't bring herself to really do. So what can I do? What would you do? So what? Those are her two songs, right? Where she's literally like, what do I do? What can I do? I'm living in this world and I have to live through this, and it's not going to affect me. I'm not Jewish, but it's affecting the person that I love. And she still can't, it's that to me is the hardest role, and the role that's the most moving.
But if you think about what you just said, that whole dilemma that she has rests with all of us, regardless of what goes. Like, we could wake up tomorrow and just like, oh my gosh, I'm having to deal with this, crap at work, or this particular situation, or it's those choices of what would you do. And it kind of goes back to what Temple was saying, and actually what we've kind of all said, of how if you take just her concept of what would you do and apply that to everything that is going on in the world at any given point, it's very poignant in terms of people. What we're watching in Cabaret are choices, people making human choices and trying to muddle through the life and the crap that they're having to deal with. And we still do that today. And I always say, whenever I'm like directing things, that choice, that decision is not necessarily solidified in one particular race. Those choices go across all races, all economic levels, all socioeconomic levels, all, I mean, anything. Kit Kat girls. You can have a big Kit Kat girls. You can have a little Kit Kat girl. The big girl's probably mad that the little girl can wear a size 2, and the little girl's mad that the big girl can eat a bag of chips. There is this whole dichotomy of people looking at others and wanting what they have or wanting better for themselves. Those are just questions that keep popping up whenever I think of just Cabaret and how it weaves a line through situations and livelihoods that a lot of us try to escape. And if you really watch Cabaret for what it is, you can't escape it.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you talk about choices, Ricky, and it sounds like you probably know this, either subconsciously or you know it, literally you know it. But Brecht, we're talking about Brechtian, is all about choices, right? Nodes, the nodes, N-O-D-E-S, which are the points of intersection that happen. That's what he called them, right? That when something happens, there's a point where you make a choice. And he uses like Lear as an example. When King Lear decides to divide his kingdom and to put faith in Goneril and Regan and not in Cordelia, because she's not flattering him. That's the whole show, right?
Yeah.
He makes a bad choice in the very beginning of the show, which destroys the rest of his life, really. And so that's what Cabaret is. It's precisely what you just said, Ricky, is that I think the choices. People make choices. Sally Bowles makes a choice. Cliff makes a choice. The Fräulein Schneider makes choices. Difficult choices. That's what it is. And it's hard to sit in the audience and judge them, but Brecht clearly showed that when you approach it with a Brechtian sort of feel, it's sort of like the choices are clear, like signposts, like here's the choice, make a choice. And you see people making the choice, whether it's for self-survival or to hide or to live another day, to be able to fight or to fight outwardly and die in the process. I don't know. Cabaret is a difficult musical because it's about such huge themes that are they are controversial and difficult. Human existence, they get down to that. So it's a tough one to put a musical for.
I like what you said about the Kit Kat Club girls, and again, it's a beautiful show to cast like that, because especially in this new interpretation where it's not this big glitzy nightclub, and they're not these cute little skinny size 2 girls doing perfect choreography. It's a crap hole in the wall. If Sally Bowles was Liza Minnelli, she wouldn't be there. She'd be in Paris. So nobody is the best of the best, which gives you the opportunity to cast a variety of body types, a variety of physical types as the Cabaret girls. And like I said, you could almost make every one of them an individual character without changing a thing. And it just gives you so many opportunity and flexibility to do non-traditional casting. And like I said, I just saw one where like she had to be a dancer, but like they one tour did Fritzy as a drug addict, and she just sitting there like stopped. She'll pick her teeth. Okay. One number she did the middle of a money song. She just stopped, scratched her crotch, and walked off stage. I mean, there's so many different ways to play with those girls now that you were kind of exploring, who they really were. They're not just backup dressing for Joel Grey. There's like I said, there's so many layers in how to cast this show, and you can make it entirely representational from top to bottom.
Just a sidebar, if you ever read the book about, I'm a huge Fosse fan, so if you ever read the book about the making of the film Cabaret and all the things they made the chorus women do in that movie, including like force feed them to gain weight. Bob Fosse told them not to shave any of their body hair for the whole, especially not under their arms.
Wow.
He told them to, they were putting, they put candle wax on their eyelashes to really have like, this gaudy look.
Okay.
And they almost look like men, quote unquote. Right. At some point, some people were like, are these men in drag? Like, and Fosse wanted sort of that sexual gender ambiguity, I should say.
There you go.
Yeah, he wanted it to be gender ambiguous. And then he plays with the, I guess because I was like 8 years old when I saw the movie, that movie like is seared forever in my brain when you see it as an 8-year-old. I mean, that weird Joel Grey character. And then the whole threesome, when they decide, screw Max, I do, so do I. Those, I mean, like, when you're a young little gay boy and you're 8 years old and you watch, you're like, oh my God, this exists. Other people know about bisexuality and gay people. And, so in a way, it was Fosse's way of sort of saying, this is all out there. So he jettisoned the Fräulein Schneider thing, but he put in this other kind of otherness. And also Liza's character, the soluble obsessiveness with this millionaire, this guy with a lot of money to be able to make the money song work. But also it said something about her value system and sort of, the money was appealing to her, because she saw it as a way to survive, this guy's money, and a way to get what she needed. So it's an interesting piece. It's not really in the original show. So
yeah, I love how it shifted throughout the years. I think we're now at what, year 50 something?
Yeah, I think it was like 66, I want to say.
66
So
is when it started. So
55 years-ish.
So, and I mean, I just love how no matter, whenever it's done on Broadway, except for I think it was 2000, maybe not 2004 definitely, but I think it was 1997 where they kind of tried to go back to the original a little bit, to the original remake. But there are directors that keep not reinventing, but then again, maybe so, where they are still telling the story of Cabaret, but they're finding new ways to highlight whatever that is, which I'm going to go with when they start taking away certain songs and putting in others. I know, just for me, I just had this conversation where every time they seem to take a stage play and turn it into a musical, they always have to have that new song for whoever that star is that they brought in
to win an Oscar.
I know. I go back to Dreamgirls. I'm like, was Listen really necessary? But anyway, Girl.
Which one?
Right,
the Jennifer Hudson song they gave her?
Oh no, that was the Beyonce. Oh no, yeah, that
Beyonce
one.
song.
Love You,
Listen,
I Do.
She got an extra song too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like,
as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Listen showed up in the last tour of Dreamgirls. I'm like, that's not what that Chicago scene is about. But okay.
So it's in the show now?
Yeah.
In the last, they put it in the last revival.
That's the thing that pisses me off. I'm like, the movie's fine. You want to do a vehicle, fine, but don't change the goodness that was the show.
And
but wait,
we have Grease. We have Grease now. Right. 7,000 productions of it. It's like a checklist. You want this song, you want this, you want that.
It's like, good that you bring this up, because this is one of those shows. Cabaret is one of the ones where this has happened to it. Like Grease, like Sound of Music, which isn't anything like. I think the movie's improved on the stage show. I cannot stand the stage show of Sound of Music. And to be honest, I don't love the stage version of Cabaret either. The original that I was in, I didn't particularly care for it versus the movie. There are songs in the movie that are just better, because I think Kander and Ebb had some time and they had Liza, who was their muse, and they were like, let's write some cool stuff. Because, Don't Tell Mama is a great song, but, if you have Mine Hair, you don't need Don't Tell Mama. And Mine Hair is I love Don't Tell Mama, but Mine Hair is like, once you hear Mine Hair, you can never unhear it. So
I had the same thing. I had the same vision. The original one, okay, I like it for what it is. I see and then the movie, and then the revival was like, oh, this is what it was. But again, I think I find it interesting, like you're saying, they took Mine Air, they took the Money Song, and they took
Maybe This Time.
It's now part of the show. Sally sings both Don't Tell Mama and Mine Air, back to back. I'm like, wow. It's like,
And a
it's
new
like
money,
overkill.
yeah, the money song is a much catchier tune than it is.
Mhm. And
I
it's
like
kind
the
of a
original.
hybrid. They start with the old and blend it into the new.
Yeah.
But yeah, but you know, maybe this time was, I mean, it's all, so it's kind of this new hybrid piece, but
Yep.
it's because they do so much. I'm willing to forgive that because they've done so much to open up so many other points of view and issues in the script that it all works. And like I said, the more music in the cabaret to reflect things, the better. They made it work.
I have
but like
to
Grease,
say-
Grease is like, ugh.
I have
What am I
to say,
seeing?
you guys have just made me realize something that it's kind of conclusive of what we're all saying, but essentially what you have just said is that when you have time to look at a piece, add to a piece, build a piece, and take time to evolve it with the world around you, at the end, you usually get a better piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what's happened with Cabaret, and I think that's what's can happen with a lot of those shows, especially when you're saying, Mark, some of those old standbys that
Mm-hmm.
could be better pieces nowadays. So I'm also looking at the time because I know we have a time limit, but I do think that is a really good point to really end on.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can respect the history because they were talking shows that were written, and I'm just going to say just for Cabaret was written based on that writer, though that production team, like whoever put that together, was based on their views at that moment. Life doesn't end. Like it one of my favorite quotes, you're born, you live, and you die, and you're done with it. That's one of those things. Ed Asner said that to Mary Tyler Moore in one of the shows. But it's true. And unfortunately he just passed. But you do that, but that is repeatable. It doesn't change. You are born, you live, you die, and you are done with it. So with Cabaret, no matter how many times it's done, the issues that are there are life issues. There are issues that you either deal with or you ignore, but they still happen. Regardless of who you are, for the four of us that are on this call, at some point we've all dealt with discrimination. We've all dealt with some type of oppression. We've all dealt with someone that has made a choice, whether it was us or someone else, to start a life, end a life. I'm going to go dance on this pole, look at this pole, whatever it is. We've all, I know I'm a little weird.
Wait, I didn't dance on no pole.
Yeah.
But you might have looked at a pole.
Way past those years.
But I'm just saying, we've all made choices in our lives, and Cabaret really speaks to, choices that were made in 1936. Those same choices are made today, different contexts, but choices are still made.
Yeah.
Chances to change the paradigm of what is happening in one's life based on whatever is happening. So it definitely does open not just a crack, but I think it opens the floodgates for those that watch, those that participate, and those that choose to direct, to not change the paradigm of the show, but to explore the different avenues that the water can flow. Because I think when we start to look at some of these old shows, we look at it, here it is in the jar, and everything has to stay in that jar. Get a bigger jar, add some more water.
You are so Southern some days, girl.
I really am. Today is a Southern day for me.
But on that same thought, that's one of the things about Cabaret that I love, because it's one of those the things you keep cycling back, and we have hit, obviously, that cycle again. And the last 4 years have shown us that, you know what, right here, we knew we weren't perfect. We knew racism's out there. We know homophobia is out there. We know but the last 4 years have showed us that there is 50% of this country literally 50% that's been under a rock, quietly growing, quietly spreading, and now they're not. Now they're outwardly recruiting, and it's like, and so we watched that creep in. We allowed it to creep in,
Changing
just like
laws in
this show.
Texas.
Hopefully, right?
Mhm.
Hopefully, we have come to a point now where we can learn from the past and stop. But I mean, it's been ushered in just in the same way as it was with these people looking and dancing and carrying on and not paying attention to what was going on right around them. We had no idea. It was brewing right under our noses.
Oh, it happens quickly. I was going to say what you were just saying about what's happening right now. When Hal Prince had the first sit-down rehearsal for the original production of Cabaret, I saw an interview with him where he said he showed everyone a photo of these Nazis, young Nazi youth, sitting there with angry looks on their face. And everyone was like, oh my God, it's so horrible, history. We need to look at this in 1936. We need to understand. And then at the end of the discussion, he said, this photo was taken last week. This is not a 1936 photo. This was taken in America last week during, this was a counter protest to a civil rights march that was happening. These were a bunch of boys in the South that were sitting down with their Nazi tattoo and their cigarette and their blonde hair and their, shirt rolled up, this t-shirt rolled up. They had this snarl on their faces. They were yelling at some poor, Black person who was just marching for their rights. So he did that precisely, Mark, to do what you said, which was to take the actors and go, this is now, right? So I assume if Hal Prince was directing it today, he would do the same. He would say, look at that, look at January 6th, look at,
MAGA hats to do swastika, it's
yeah.
like.
You see that within or whenever Obama was president, the images that they would show of Obama, where you're like, really, these are images of the president? This is what you're putting up there? That show, all the racism was exposed. It came out from under the rocks. And, yeah. So I think that's what Cabaret is about too. Cabaret is about exposing that and saying, it's there. And if you think this is an old story, wake up.
So any parting words before I announce this reclaimed to a certain degree?
Those were my parting words. I'm done.
I think I've pretty much capsulized my views.
I did mine. Other than I think you guys are amazing. So thank you.
I think you're amazing too, Temple.
Yes.
So with that, I'm going to attempt to share this and see if it works out in my favor.
Nice. Reclaim.
I'm going to call this Reclaimed. My only thing that I have. But no, thank you, Mark Briner, Stefan Siddick, Temple, Fortson, Lord, Roberts. That y'all got way too many last names. She has all of them hyphenated for days.
Thank you.
But no, thank you all for doing this. And yeah, just it's all a conversation and just keep it going, because if we don't talk about it, then we just fall victim to just staying the same. So with that,